So how would you define the difference between therapy and a therapist and spiritual direction and a spiritual director? Are they the same thing, or
You can't sue your spiritual director.
you can't sue? And this is Pod Have Mercy.
Russell.
This is Pod Have Mercy. I'm John Stevens. Hey, Jerry Webber,
Scoreboard.
our friend.
Hey, guys.
We have Jerry Webber with us on
Hey,
on Pod Have Mercy this
how's that
week.
for a
Our
segue?
best friend in Arkansas.
just a ray of sunshine, Jerry Webber.
The only person you know in Arkansas.
No, I know. Yes, the only person I know in Arkansas. I think that's right. I think that's actually correct. So, how are you doing?
You guys are a ray of sunshine. I almost never want to cut my ear off after I've listened to you.
Like Vincent Van Gogh. Good for you.
Like Van Gogh, yeah.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah. We've had some family things and some hard some grief this summer. Mother-in-law passed away, so we've been dealing with a lot of that. But yeah, doing okay, doing good.
Well, I'm sorry about that. I know that's been
Yeah,
a lot of going back and forth and taking care.
yeah. It's good to see you guys. I miss you.
We miss you too.
We
For
do.
those of you who don't know, Jerry was on staff here at Chapelwood for 172 years.
Yeah.
It was taken up by the Lord
Yeah, that's right.
to Arkansas.
He rode the chariot, came down like Elisha or whatever, and took him straight to heaven. Do not pass go. It was either that or what was the other guy, Korah, that the earth split open and he went straight
just
down.
sucked him
There was
in?
the only two that didn't literally die.
Well, he's in Arkansas, so he must have been sucked
He
into
must
the.
have been sucked in on the
Korah.
Korah's rebellion. But yeah, Jerry started the Center for Christian Spirituality at Chapelwood, which is a contemplative community here and been very influential, and not just in Houston, Texas, but all over the place. And Jerry retired and moved to Arkansas, be closer to family and grandbabies, and still does a lot of stuff around Christian spirituality. You do a lot of teaching and a lot of speaking and a lot of, I guess, meditating. And that's like a contemplative's greatest dream, is to move to the Ozarks and just like fade into the
Be left
long
alone.
night, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm going to push back on that retired thing. I tend to be busier now than I ever was at Chapelwood.
Well, good. That's what it should be.
Yeah,
You just cross the threshold.
yeah. So, yeah, doing a lot of things, a lot of speaking and spiritual direction and writing, and trying to help people in the journey and walking alongside folks. So it's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, so
And the pandemic, while everybody else was shut down in the pandemic, I was already doing Zoom stuff and online, and that just, pandemic comes and everybody has to stay home. They're looking for things to do. So all of a sudden, the kind of thing I was doing became a hot commodity.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Do you do a lot of spiritual direction on Zoom?
I do. I have a handful of people I do face to face, but most of it's online.
That's great.
Yeah. And I found it works pretty well. It
does.
works. It's a different dynamic than being face to face, and you miss all the interpersonal cues, the nonverbals, and all that. But people are still hungry, and people are wanting to think about life differently, and so. Yeah, it works. It's not ideal, but it works.
You know what I always have found, like in the Zoom stuff with spiritual direction, that most of the spiritual directors I know talk about the inner voice and attuning yourself to the inner voice. And often, if it's not an embodied presence, you're having to kind of already deal with the inner voice of someone that you're kind of interacting with already online or something. I found it to be really helpful in some ways.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Well, we were.
Yeah,
No, I was just going to say, go ahead. You had a thought.
No, I don't find it to be much of a hindrance. I have my own spiritual director that I meet with online, and the people that I meet with, it may take a session or two to kind of get used to being online with that, but people just bring the stuff of their lives and get, it gets real pretty fast. And in some ways, because there is a distance, there may be a little more safety. That may be what you were sensing, Matt. I don't know. I'm in the safety of my room. I'm in the safety of this place that's really familiar to me. And so I can be vulnerable. I mean, you're not sitting right here with me, so I can throw it out there. And I find people get really vulnerable pretty quick on Zoom in spiritual direction.
So I've met with Jerry on spiritual direction, and he says, how are things going on your life? And the great thing about Zoom is when he says how things are going in your life, I can say, they're going great. And I cross my fingers like under the thing. Yeah, everything's great. It's so good.
Pastor.
I mean, I'm not any better. And I've all my fingers crossed down here, and I'm like picking my nails, and my knees are like doing this. But up here, I'm like, yeah, it's just so smooth, man. You just so good.
Yeah.
It's like that duck.
John's updating Facebook just below the screen. And,
He's saying meeting with my spiritual director.
Yes, meeting. So one of the things you and I were talking about, you recently, what I thought would be interesting to talk about, you just came back. Tell us a little bit about the Academy for Spiritual Formation. You just led a session there, and I pulled them up online, and they have upcoming retreats, and I was trying to decide, do I want to go to Alabama, Oklahoma, Arizona, or Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Arizona looks nice. Puerto Rico.
I think the one in Alabama is a 2-year thing. The others are probably 5 days.
I can't commit 2 years.
To Alabama, too.
Yeah.
To Alabama.
It seems more like, I don't know, Alabama.
I spent my whole life growing up next to Alabama. That's good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the one in Alabama now is at a really nice Episcopalian retreat center, and it's from what I hear, really, really pretty cool. Yeah, it's the Academy for Spiritual Formation is this ministry of the Upper Room Ministries in Nashville, connected to United Methodist, the Board of Discipleship, but really with kind of a mission to help people, the Upper Room and the Academy, to help people with spiritual formation, whatever their background. So kind of the centerpieces of their ministry is they offer a 5-day Academy for Spiritual Formation in a lot of different locations. And I think most of those that you just read are 5-day academies where a group of about 50 or 60 people come to a retreat center and they just stay for a week. Prayer 4 times a day, Eucharist every day. They're in covenant groups every day with the same covenant group. And then there are 2 faculty people who come in. One speaks in the morning and the other speaks in the afternoon. And so you get a 1-hour faculty presentation about a particular topic, and then people have an hour of silence to reflect on that, and then to come back and share or feedback with that faculty presenter. And so, yeah, that's where I was in Virginia last week.
That's great.
And my piece in that was teaching about Psalms, praying the Psalms as spiritual formation, Psalms and the spiritual journey. So you have the 5-day academy, which takes place in a location in one of those places you just read, John. And then the 2-year Academy for Spiritual Formation is a series of 8 of those 5-day experiences over 2 years. So you've got the same group of 50 or 60 people going to the same location 8 different times over 2 years. So each time the rhythm is the same, this Benedictine rhythm, but you have 2 new faculty people coming each time, and they have a set curriculum that goes through scripture for spiritual formation, Old Testament spirituality, New Testament spirituality. It gets into spiritual direction, into prayer, into discernment, all sorts of things. And so you have 2 different faculty people over a 2-year period of time. So by the end of it, you've had 16 different curriculum pieces. And the people who usually teach are seminary professors and people who are kind of at the front of a given field. And so it's just this really intense kind of experience of spiritual formation and community building. It involves silence, and it's probably the best program like it. In fact, I don't really know another program like it out there. There have been other people who've tried to kind of mimic it, but it's really got some legs. It's been around for over 30 years now. And so they've tweaked it over the years, and during the pandemic, they kind of started doing some of those things online, and it took a little different shape. But now, getting back to face, at a retreat center, and since last October, I've spoken at 4 different 5-day academies in different parts of the country. Tend to be local conferences. Annual conferences tend to sponsor the 5-day. And then you have the 2-year experiences that are kind of larger, and in some of these sort of centralized locations like Alabama. I did the 2-year academy in the late 90s in Wisconsin at a Dominican retreat house. They used to do them in California. They've done them in Maryland and Florida. Used to do them in San Antonio at the Oblate Renewal Center. So yeah, I'd say those are pretty good entry points for folks who are interested in spiritual formation, to find a 5-day experience and just kind of plug in and see how that feels, see how the rhythm works.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, I was looking at here on their website, they talk about this research that they've done for people who've been through these academies for spiritual formation, and they found that people who attended one of these academies, like 80% of the people that would participate felt like after they left they had a deeper hunger for God, and 75% people reported that they experienced increased self-compassion.
Wow.
And so I was just wondering, like, if someone was listening and thinking, well, I wonder if that's something that would be interesting to do or not. What kind of person, or where is someone in their faith journey? I mean, these are good things. I mean, if you're talking about 80%, it deepens their hunger for God, and 75%, I think self-compassion, what that's like, you learning to love yourself. Is that what that would be?
Yeah. To receive yourself, to accept yourself. Yeah. Yeah, I think that my experience has been the people who find it most appealing are those who already have a hunger, who have some kind of itch for something more, some a different kind of prayer life, maybe a more contemplative kind of posture, a person who's eager to learn, a person who I was going to say maybe more comfortable with silence, but we have people who come who have never really had silence before, and they tend to find it refreshing and they want more of it. So, but I'd say, kind of a basic gentle tug or a gentle leading, a kind of guiding into spirituality, prayer, worship. The worship is liturgical, but it's kind of creative. And so it's a different sort of worship experience. Daily Eucharist at both the 5-day and the 2-year in the 2-year experience. So there's that daily experience of Eucharist, and for some people that's a real important piece. What most people kind of walk away from is a deep sense of community, not only with the large community of people who have the same experience, but with a covenant group of 6 or 7 or 8 other people with whom they spend about an hour and a half every evening, just kind of processing, and this is where I've been today, and this is what God seems to be doing in my life, and to have that kind of tight, close-knit relationship to talk about the deeper things of life, the transcendent things of life, seems to be really, really important to people. And kind of some of the feedback I get is that those times, the covenant group times, tend to be the real game changers for a lot of people. Hearing myself say out loud to another group of people that I can trust to hold the space and to allow me to be vulnerable, that there may be some of that self-love, that's not self-love, but that self-awareness, that kind of love and care for myself that kind of arises out of that.
That's good.
So how would you define the difference between therapy and a therapist and spiritual direction and a spiritual director? Are they the same thing, or
You can't sue your spiritual director.
you can't sue?
That's the only difference.
You probably could.
Well, you can, but the Apostle Paul said it's not a good thing. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think of therapy, and I've done therapy. Most of us have. Therapy tends to be sniffing out and trying to fix problems, or at least cope with problems, or it's more in that kind of fixing, coping kind of realm. And spiritual direction really travels in a different world, and that's where is God in this, and what is this situation, this hard situation? Not trying to fix it, but what is God inviting you to do, or what's God inviting you to be in the middle of this? How's God shaping you in the middle of this? So the questions tend to be more interior. They're not exclusively interior, but they tend to be less about fixing and coping and how do I get by right now than they are. I would say they're invitational.
Interesting.
And I think good spiritual direction and good therapy probably go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. They're different, but I think I don't think they're at odds with each other. I used to hear Father Thomas Keating say, what everybody needs is a really good spiritual director and a real good psychotherapist.
Yeah.
So, you put those two kinds of things together, and the one is about coping and dealing with life in more constructive ways, but the other one is asking more directly the God question.
Yeah.
Where is God in this? And what's God doing? And what's God's invitation to me? And how can I be more open to what God's doing, even in this situation that really feels cruddy? It really feels like a mess.
One of the things I've learned from you and just hearing you speak in our relationship is that whole concept, or the whole practice of noticing and being attentive to and becoming aware of. And it seems that in times therapy can be conceptualized as, how do I get out of this? And what do I need to do, and capacities I need to form? And that's, some of those things are super useful, right? But there's, I think, somewhat in spiritual direction is really asking the question of transformation. Like, how might this pain, if God is in it, how might this time transform me, and what is it asking of me? What is it summoning me to be or to become? Which is a different question than, how the hell do I get out of this?
Sure. Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah, because I think all of spirituality is really about noticing and awareness. You use the word noticing, and I would say awareness or attentiveness. And so how do I become more attentive in this pain or in this difficult situation? How do I become more attentive to my own kind of inner life and how that inner life is impacting others? So it's not just about me, but if I've got stuff that's coming out sideways, it's probably hurting somebody else.
Yes.
And I'm standing back saying, well, I wonder why he or she's hurt by that, when I'm spewing all this stuff out at them. But if I can be attentive enough or aware enough to notice kind of my own inner landscape in the middle of that, spiritual direction then is not trying to fix that, but it's simply saying, be aware of it, so that as it happens, you're aware that this is where you're going, this is who you're hurting, and so what might be another way to be in this?
Yeah, for me, that it was doing an examine, like a daily examine at the end of the day, a type of an examine where I would go back and play through interactions that you had with people, what were the positive interactions that were life-giving, where God was present. And it's like, trying to learn about yourself. It's like, how was I open to that? Or how did I contribute to that, or whatever. It sounds selfish, but it's not at all. It's just an awareness. And then there's usually, for me, always a few of those where it's like, where did I really screwed this up and got in my own way and said things to people. And it's like, what was I feeling? A lot of times for me, it's like, okay, I was feeling vulnerable, or I was feeling threatened, or I was feeling a loss of control. And by acknowledging that and recognizing it and seeing how it manifested in a way in a relationship with someone that was detrimental or not healthy, if nothing else, it just made me aware going forward that in the next day and the next day and the next day, when there were the opportunity for that to come in again, you just are aware. So you're a little bit slower. It doesn't mean you don't fall into the same trap, but you do get better. I mean, you can work on that. That's me.
That's right.
That's kind of my experience on it.
Yeah, I think the examine is kind of a core spiritual practice for that. And, for me, sometimes I think about my own kind of where I am and my own spiritual health. And I can almost measure that pretty reliable how when something happens in the outer world and I react to it, how long it takes me to come to some sense of why I'm reacting from within.
Yeah. So
if I react to my wife in a way that's really sideways, and I come to an awareness of my own inner being enough to know why I did that, why I reacted that way, if I can come to that within a couple of hours or 6 hours even, then I'm probably in a pretty good place. But if I sit in the stew of something that my wife has said or done, and I sit in that stew for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, without any awareness of my part in that, then I'm probably not in a really good place.
Yeah.
Okay.
So awareness becomes kind of a barometer for me of where am I? If I can come to awareness more quickly, then it's say, okay, that's what this is. I'm holding this thing that inside me, and I haven't let go of it. So now I at least want to be aware of that, so I know what's driving me in this situation.
All right. So this is the example that every husband and their wife, you driving in the car. My wife, we've been married. It'll be 30 years next year, 29 years this year.
If y'all make it.
If we make it, we're going to make it at least in another week or two. It's only September 11th is our anniversary. I think I can.
Michelle says to me.
So one of the things I think I find it's like, okay, so we're driving to say X restaurant. We're going to dinner. We're going to drive to X restaurant. So we come out, we go down the road.
It's called
and as we get up to King's Ride or whatever, she goes, Are you and before we even get at the intersection, are you going to take a right here? Are you going to go this way? And I was like, and there immediately in this moment, as soon as she says that, there's like this anger in me. Like, why the hell are you telling me to turn on King's Road? Of course I know to turn on King's Road. I've only driven this way 800 times. Or she goes, oh, that light's red. Yeah, I see the light is red. Well, I didn't feel like you were stopped. I feel like I'm making my wife sound horrible, but I'm saying is she's not. I'm talking about how it makes me feel. And there's something about we get in the car. Yes. And now what I just do after 29 years of marriage, as we get out, we pull out of the driveway, and I was like, which way you want to go, honey? You want to go the right way, or you want to go your way? But no, I guess the point I'm making it as a joke is that through the years, I realized, what is it in me that gets so mad and angry about her giving me directions on what she thinks is a better way to go? Yeah. Because she's offering it up as a legitimate way, as I think this way will be faster because you avoid the light or whatever else. And I'm just really seethed by that. But I've gotten better through the years. I've gotten better.
But that's kind of the human condition that, my life would be good if everybody out there would straighten up. If everybody out there would do what's right or act right or whatever, my life would be better. And spiritually speaking, transformation always begins from the inside out. It doesn't begin with getting my life world straight. It begins with doing my own work. And being aware like that. So, even some of our spiritual teachers would even say, John, that in that moment, Stephanie is a gift to you, helping you to do your work.
Oh Lord, she's going to hear this.
That's going to be your new ringtone.
I'm going to text her. I'm going to text her and say, you need to listen to minute 23.
Yeah. It's going to be your ringtone, I swear.
I'm toast. I'll never live this down. The next 30 years are going to be, remember when Jerry said I was a gift to you in this moment? Hey, let's see if I can make this work. I have a question for you. But
I'm an introvert. I need to think about questions before
no,
I
this is going to be good. So my daughter,
Okay.
Maddie, is a senior at OU, and she has FaceTime me while we're on the podcast, and I said, "Well, babe, I'm on the podcast. We're interviewing Jerry Webber," and she's like, "So here she is." So she has a question, Maddie.
I love this.
Hi, I just got locked out of my house. Hold on.
Oh, look, here she is. You got locked out of your house?
I did.
Well, I was FaceTiming you. I told you to be ready. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, you're live on air
Okay.
with Jerry, and you had a question for Jerry. Look, there she is.
Hi,
love it.
am I like on the screen?
You're on the screen, and he can hear you. So go ahead, ask him your
Maddie.
question.
Well, I have to look what I typed out. Okay, my question was, what are some ways to listen for the Lord when you feel distracted or unfocused on the word or prayer?
Did you hear it?
I could just barely hear it. What are some ways to listen to?
What are some ways that you can listen to the Lord when you feel distracted or unfocused on the word when you're praying? Is that right, Maddie?
Yeah, just like reading scripture or praying or something
Like
that.
when you're reading scripture or praying and you get unfocused, how do you focus?
And like listen to the voice of the Lord.
And listen more clearly to the Lord and not be distracted. Thanks, Maddie. We'll hang up and you can listen to the answer on the podcast this week. No, I'll leave you on so you can hear it.
I thought this was sports talk radio. I'll hang
Yeah,
up and
sports
listen.
talk. We got ahead. It's Maddie from Norman, Oklahoma.
Long time listener, first time caller. Go ahead, Maddie.
First time, long time.
So yeah, ways I think all of us have prayed or read scripture, and like at night when I lay and pray and I lose focus, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to pull a technique out, rather than try to focus on the whole thing, like to engage the mind on the whole passage or the whole paragraph, choose a single phrase or a single image that's in the passage, if you can find one that may seem interesting to you or kind of stirs you inside, and just pull that phrase or that image, that maybe a symbol, just pull it out of that, and then just meditate on that for a moment. Just let that kind of go around in your head for a moment, and let it go around in your head enough that it may slowly kind of seep down into your heart. And when you do that, there's not a particular way you need to feel. And if you feel distracted, that's okay. Distraction's okay. We all get distracted. But by pulling out a single phrase or a single symbol out of a passage, then and meditating with that for just a moment, then you give it an opportunity to get from your head down to your heart. And then what you can do after that is if you're going to sleep or then you wake up the next morning and you have this word or this phrase or this symbol on your heart, and then look for ways that symbol or that phrase shows up in the course of your day. So you don't have it's not about just sitting and meditating and concentrating harder, but it's about doing this brief meditation with the word or the phrase, and then just kind of letting it go. And then, but inviting God to show you in the course of life, then, when you're walking to class or when you're sitting in a lecture that's really boring or something, just to, God, bring this symbol or this word or phrase back to life for me in whatever I'm doing now, and see if there aren't things that God kind of brings to you that connect your real life with that word, phrase, or that symbol.
What do you think?
That was good.
Oh, it was good. Yeah, I think she said it was good. You know what you're talking about, she said.
No, like I needed to hear
I
that.
really don't.
That's really helpful.
That's right.
It is helpful. Hey, well, thanks for calling in.
yeah,
We're
just-
going to start taking live calls from now on the podcast.
Okay.
Hey, do good at your class.
Just give your
Thanks. I'll talk to you later.
All right, bye. I love you.
Bye.
Hey, I think that's the first time we've ever taken a live call in.
I love that.
We
Cool.
did call my
Yeah.
mother
Glad to
one
be
time on
part
the
of a first.
podcast live,
We
but we
did.
had to edit it out.
Yeah. We had to go dark.
I think what we don't want to do is just think that we have to try harder,
Yeah.
because trying harder or concentrating more is its own distraction.
Yeah, and I think, for Maddie, and I think for a lot of young people, and I was the same way when I was in college. I was getting turned on to my faith, and there were all these ways that I thought you were supposed to do it. You had to try harder. I didn't have the maturity or the wisdom, and so it was all about, I've got to spend more time, and I've got to try harder, and oh my gosh, I can't stay focused, and you beat yourself up, and then you feel ashamed. It's like I'm not living into whatever that expectation. You remember, Jerry, you grew up Baptist, or your background is Baptist, and I remember, this expectation that every day you had to have your quiet time, and there was this kind of loaded expectation of like, did you have your quiet time today? Did you have your quiet time today?
QT?
Your QT today? Did you get a QT today? Oh, I missed my quiet time
that
today.
worked for
I'm such a
about 10
failure.
days.
Yeah.
That worked for 10 days. I kept the notebook, and then I never opened the notebook again.
Yeah.
But it was more driven by expectation and obligation, almost this legalism rather than relational. It was perfunctory. It was kind of this thing you had to do, to prove your worth. You remember that?
I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. I think in some
And
ways,
it's also that style is also very kind of study driven, analytical, and it tends to live in the head. So, I've got to study this passage, and I've got to parse it and figure out what it means, go to the internet or go to a commentary or something. And it really, I think that's a big reason. The three of us have talked offline before about how the failure of the church has been that we haven't allowed the word to get into people's lives.
yeah.
And so, we kind of have a dysfunctional church, capital C, right now, church everywhere, because we've had all this teaching and this, Bible study, but we haven't had Bible living.
Wow.
So how do we take, a word, a phrase, a symbol, an image from a passage of scripture, and then open ourselves to what God's saying about that in the world I live in?
Yeah.
What does this have to do with my lived life?
Yeah. What's interesting to me in spiritual direction, and I wonder if you can comment on this. It feels like in spiritual direction that I am building capacities to notice the overwhelming presence of God in the world, and that the way I grew up was that I have to be the center of that, and there's a rope that I have to create from me to God, and it's with all of this stuff, and you don't build I never built the capacity to notice the what Richard Rohr calls the necessary that kind of that necessary falling apart, that descent narrative. All those things are what I'm trying to keep away from. And then the spiritual life seems to summons me to a way of saying, oh, I swim in the sea of grace, and even the issues of my problems, addictions, whatever, aren't inhibitors to that. They're part and parcel of the path. Is that true? Is that not true?
I think that's right on target. I mean, I don't think we've helped people have that capacity to swim in the sea of grace. But I think it was Anthony de Mello, the Jesuit, Indian Jesuit priest, who tells a little story about, I don't have the story on top of my head, but the punchline of the story is, you can do as little to make this happen as a fish can to find the ocean. And that's the punchline. You're already in it. Yeah. You can do as little to make something happen in connection to God or whatever as a fish can to find the ocean. And the point of it, you're already there. So stop trying to make it happen. Stop trying to earn your way there, to do enough that you're worthy of it. Just let it happen in you. It's already there. It's already trying to happen in you.
What the other thing you said a minute ago about how we get so intellectual about it. It's what was the way you phrased it? When you're driven to study it in that way, outside of a relationship, more as an obligation, you become more like, it's almost like apologetics. That was the old term. It's like you're studying to defend the faith, right? Yeah. The problem I find, like even in our denominational argument and squabble, is everyone wants to like see who's the smartest about defending the Bible, and yet no one knows the Bible. I mean, they only know that it says in there some places about certain things. They don't know the Bible. You know, I was talking to a preacher recently, and he said, as a guy in his church that said, you know, I don't need to read the Bible. I know what's in there.
I know what it says.
You know, I don't need to read it. I know what's in there. And so it's like, and we're arguing about things. It's like, oh, I know what it says. It says that. Well, it's like, we've been talking about Ephesians, you know, and this big, you know, you've been a part of this, the oneness and the peace, you know, the unity is, the peace is. It's not something we build or create or craft. It's there. We either choose to participate in it or we don't. And it's not an intellectual exercise. I mean, the first 3 chapters of Ephesians, Paul's not talking about intellectual system. I mean, it's a deep theological conversation, but it's about who God is and who we are and how we're connected together. It isn't the little ticky-tack lists of wrong and right. And there are essentials. We talk about this. There are essentials. Sure. But what we do is we turn non-essentials into essentials. And I just think it's interesting when you're talking about coming at it from an intellectual. It's like we're all arguing in a denominational split about how right we are about the Bible. And people I'm listening to, I'm thinking, none of us really know what we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, and that kind of spirituality still upholds the ego project of myself being the center. And what I'm hearing y'all talk about is that there's another way that where the very presence of God, this mystery of God, is so present that I'm decentered but transformed in that decentering of my very self. So my own knowledge of God can really just be another project where I stick in myself in the center, knowing the right answers and making sure that everybody falls in line, you know, or securing my own future out of my right answers. But if you're lost in a wood and not knowing the way forward, your right answers don't do anything. You have to figure out a different capacity of where you are and what to do now.
Yeah.
Well,
agreed.
We can keep going and going and going about. That's some good stuff, though. I like that. Now, you taught on, before we go, and I want to be faithful to your time, and we get to go from here and talk about Christmas Eve.
Hey, why don't you just stay on with us, bro?
You want to talk about
like
Christmas Eve? We've had this conversation on the podcast before about Christmas Eve, and what the joke we made was like how to tell if you attend a church that's not Baptist. They don't have an 11 p.m. Christmas Eve.
Right.
I mean, the Baptist churches don't have 11 p.m. Christmas. Am I right or am I right?
Yeah, back in my day, they didn't even have Christmas Eve.
Are you serious? The Baptists?
No, but on Sunday, we're going to have morning and evening preaching. And Wednesday night, yeah. I had to institute Christmas Eve services at the 2 Baptist churches I pastored.
Really?
They just didn't do it. It was like Sunday or Wednesday. And by golly, preacher, you're going to preach twice on Sunday and once on Wednesday. But
y'all did Advent and Lent too, right? In the Baptist church.
Only because I introduced it.
My brother loves Advent and Lent, but he's like, no one knows what that is. They don't know what that is.
During seminary, I went to a real progressive Baptist church that was very Methodist-like, and learned about Advent and Lent. Never had heard of it. Thought, this is great. So what do? The first church I pastored, this little country church in Northeast Texas, go in and say, we're going to do Advent. We're going to do Lent. It's like, son, we don't do that around here.
I don't read the Bible, but I know what it says, and there ain't nothing in there about no Advent and Lent.
I think we did in that first church, and they were good people. I think they let me light candles, and we may have done a reading, each week, but it was that was about it. So
that's awesome.
But even at the candles, I had to convince them that I was not trying to make them Catholics.
Right.
Because there's nothing worse.
Yeah.
Nothing worse for a Baptist church.
That's the biggest difference between Baptists and Methodists. And even in the South, in Deep South, Methodist, man, there's this very anti-Catholic like thing. Like when we do the Apostles' Creed and we say, I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints. And they're like, whoa, preacher, I don't believe in no Catholic Church now. And I had to explain to them what that meant. But so we're going to talk about Christmas Eve. You can join us on the Christmas Eve, the Christmas Eve strategy. No, what I was going to say before we go, though, is you did the Academy of Spiritual Formation, and you taught your subject was the Psalms. What was the one, if you had one thing that you thought, man, this really resonated with me as I was teaching in the Academy of Spiritual Formation or related to Psalms, what was the one thing that resonated with you as you were preparing and leading?
The thing that resonated with me, and I think it resonated with the people there, is, and I don't know that I used this word for it, but I'll just say how resilient God is. In the Psalms are so raw, so sharp, so jagged, so cutting, so real and honest, that it takes a lot for most people to really trust that they can be that honest with God, and God's not going to cut the cord, just snip. And we carry so much of this old baggage that if I do something wrong, I say something wrong, and we make jokes like, "Oh, God's gonna throw a thunderbolt at me" or something like that. And you get these Psalms where the psalmist prays, I hate these Babylonians so much. I just wish somebody would dash their babies against the rocks. Or Psalm 88, God, you put me in a pit and I'm in darkness and all my friends are gone. Everything I know is gone. You did this, God. Darkness is my closest friend. And, for somebody to pray this kind of Hebrew mindset that I can say anything to God and God's not going to dismiss me. Wow. That there's nothing I can do, nothing I can say that's going to scare God off. And so I just think of that as, we don't often think, or I don't often think about the resilience of God, but God is so tough and God is so resilient that it's no threat to God if I stand and wave my fists and curse and have a hissy fit. And some of that even makes its way into the Bible.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But God, that's the kind of love, that's the kind of reception, hospitality God has toward those of us, toward all people, toward God's people.
Amen.
And that's
bring yourself just as you are, say whatever you want to say, do whatever you want to do. There's nothing you can do, nothing you can say that's going to cause God to cut the cord on you.
No.
God's going to stay tied to you, connected to you, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
Yeah, and our culture, it's a culture of orientation. You're up, you're happy, it's joyful, you're never down. That's weakness. If you're down, it's weak. Yep. I heard somebody say the other day that there in what's happened in the distortion of Christianity in America is that there's no longer good and evil, right and wrong. It's now winning and losing. And if you're winning, you're good and you're right. And if you're losing, you're evil and you're wrong. And so we've lost that language. We've lost that language of lament. We've lost that understanding of the suffering servant. We've lost that understanding of, of humility, and I don't know. It's just gotten distorted. I just trying to help people recapture a language of lament. Brueggemann talks a lot about that. Capturing the language of disorientation. That's our language. That's our prayer language. If you go to Psalms, I tell people the first 7 of the first 10 Psalms, 7 of them are laments.
Yeah.
And that ought to tell you something. But I love the image of God as resilient, because if I was God, I was just like, all right, I'm done with you, buddy. Smite him.
I think that's the understanding that many of us carry deep down in us, and that's why we don't trust God's resilience, because we've been trained that if we make one wrong step, God's going to let us go. And so it becomes about worthiness and meritocracy and what I earn in life.
Yeah.
And I have to earn God's love, earn God's goodness. And that if I dare to raise a fist and pray Psalm 88 or Psalm 137, God's going to get me. And if I dare to lament, or if I dare, the complaint, what Brueggemann calls the complaint psalms. This one psalm, I thought of kind of our contemporary cultural landscape with Psalm 109. It's this psalm that it says, it starts off with this kind of, God, look how badly everyone's treating me, and they're so mean, and they're this and they're that. But while they are all vile, God, I am a man of love. While they want my doom, I pray for them. And that's in the first 3 verses. Verse 3 ends, I pray for them. And then the next 25 verses is what he prays for them. God, take away their children. Take all the cattle from their fields. God, may their bank accounts be empty. May they have no ancestors. And for 25 verses,
wipe them out.
Smite them, O holy smiter.
Smite them all. It's like, I am so holy, God. I'm a man of love, and I will pray for them. And then this is his prayer. It's like, that's what our culture is full of. I'm praying for you, brother. Well, that's
Be careful.
half the people who say that. I think that's what they're praying.
Bless your heart.
That's so good.
Bless your heart. Bless your little heart.
Jerry, we love you, man. We miss you down here, and
Miss you guys.
but glad you're up there doing the good work in Arkansas, and always glad when you come on, because you just bring some grounded, maturity and spirituality, at least on the podcast. And then when you're here and not on the podcast, we can get into other kinds of trouble.
We love you.
Tell Stephanie that I love her no matter which way you go to dinner, and and tell Maddie that I'm glad she called.
You know what? I'm glad that was so awesome, because she was FaceTiming me walking from class, and I said, we're interviewing Jerry Webber on the podcast. Do you have a question about spirituality? And she just immediately, normally your kid would go, no, thank you. And she said, hey, I have a question. I was like, all right, I'm FaceTiming you. You can ask him yourself. So that was really cool.
Cool. That's great.
That was awesome.
That's great.
Well, thanks, Jerry. Appreciate
Good to see
you, brother.
You guys.
Well, hey, make sure you like the podcast. Make sure you share it with friends. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you do all that kind of stuff. Share it on Facebook, on Insta, on this, on that. I don't even know what I'm talking about, but I think it's important. TikTok. I did tell you last week that somebody said, they were asking me, it's like, where do you get your news? Because I think I know where you get your news. And I was like, I read everything. I read Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times. It's like, as soon as you get to one they don't like, they go, I knew you read that one. Oh. So what do you watch on TV? I said, well, actually, I don't watch it all the time. I said, but I kind of watch them all. I said, I'll give them all like at least 15, 20 minutes to hear what they're saying, and just kind of shows me how far apart we are in all this world. And then I look at them and I said, well, where do you get your news? And they go, TikTok. I didn't even know they had news on TikTok, but there you go.
There you have it.
The most trusted name in news. TikTok.
We're going to dance the news for you tonight.
The most trusted doom scrolling in all the world. From China, TikTok. Well, I'm John Stevens.
And I'm Matt Russell.
And this is Pod Have Mercy.
Hello, neighbor, how are you? Really wanna shower you with love. Hello, neighbor, how are you? Really wanna challenge you